Lore and Story Q&A panel. Here to answer your questions are Leonard Boyarsky, Michael Chu, Brian Kindrigan, and Valerie Watrous.
Oh, wow. All right. Hey, Blizzcon. I'm Brian Kindrigan. I'm the lead writer on Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls. And I'm going to ask everyone on our panel to introduce themselves before we get to the questions. So let's start with Leonard.
I'm Leonard Boyarsky. I'm the senior world designer.
Hey, I'm Michael Chu. I'm a game designer and a writer, and you can probably blame me for some characters like the Monk, Witch Doctor, Covetous Shen, and Zoltan Kuhl.
Hi, I'm Valerie Watrous. I'm a writer on Diablo. I work mostly on dialogue and characterization.
Hello, I'm Justin Parker. I am the historian, or one of the historians. We mostly work with the lore that's gone before and trying to keep continuity as best we can.
So Justin is a surprise last-minute addition to our panel so that he can help with some of the really deep Diablo history if we get into that. So, okay, let's just open it right up for some questions.
If you have any question, come here.
One of the things that I kind of wanted to see if you guys were thinking about, specifically with this release, is a failure cinematic. You failed to defeat Maffeo, he kills you. Instead of just respawning, do you see him destroy humanity?
Well, I don't think we'd be able to do a failure cinematic as such because cinematics are enormously expensive and time-consuming. So even though that would be a lot of fun, if we had to do that at the expense of, say, the opening cinematic, you know, that would not be so good. Like the only cinematic that you'd see is the failure. So we wouldn't be able to do anything like that, but we are exploring a couple of interesting things we can do when you die. Unfortunately, I don't think any of them are at the point where I could talk about them quite yet.
Hello. I was actually told to address this question to Leonard Boyarsky.
You're welcome, Leonard.
So in Sanctuary, the main barbarian is called Bulkathos. He's like the original barbarian. However, the Immortal King set, which is like the main barbarian set, it mentions Warsuk, who is like king of the barbarians apparently. But so is the Immortal King a reference to Warsuk, or is it Bulkathos, and who is Warsuk?
I'm so glad you asked that question. Warusk, by the way, is he was a king. He became king by uniting the tribes. Bulkathos was pretty much a deity, semi-deity, and he was the first one to unite the tribes. But that was, you know, way back in ancient times, and his legend of the barbarians, you know, pretty much one of their myths. And this Warusk guy came along a lot later when they were all human beings and the tribes were all warring, and he put them all together. And then after that, they had the council, like at Seneschal and Harrogath, however you say that. And so he was given the honorary title of Immortal King in reference to the fact that he did the same thing that Bulkathos had done.
Thank you.
Hello. What happened to the dragon? Where's Trangul? Is he gonna come up in the expansion?
Justin, do you want to take a little bit of this?
Well, there just doesn't seem to have been an appropriate place to reintroduce him. I mean, obviously the necromancers are still referencing him and drawing on his power, but he hasn't made an appearance since quite some time ago.
So he's out there somewhere, but...
Hi. I was wondering how the Templar and Crusader differ in ideology, and will they have any specific dialogue in the X-Pack?
They differ in ideology quite a bit. So the Templar is a member of an order that sort of rose from the ashes of the Paladin order, and they're a newer group, and they have, as you learned in Diablo 3, they have some very questionable practices as far as how they indoctrinate people into their order. The Crusaders are actually a group that was created at the same time as the Paladin order long ago. And they went off in the opposite direction. When the Paladins went west, they went east on sort of a secret mission. And so they disappeared into the marshlands of the east and were not heard from again for a long time. And now they've come rolling out of the east to discover a very different world than the one that they knew when they left. So they actually are sort of, they trace their origins back to the early days of the Zakarum faith. And so they represent sort of an older and perhaps more pure version of the Zakarum faith than is currently known on Sanctuary.
Hello. In Zoltan Kuhl's archives, there's a bunch of coffins that are floating in the background. What are in them? Like, what are they containing or hiding?
Michael?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear. There are what floating in the background?
In Zoltan Kuhl's archives in Act 2, there's a bunch of coffins that are floating in the background.
Well, Zoltan Kuhl was really interested in a lot of different things. Pretty much anything that had to do with magic. He was curious. He liked to experiment a lot. And so what you sort of find around the archives are sort of what's left over from his experiments and, if just magical excitement.
All right, thank you.
So at the end of Diablo 2, the World Stone was shattered. Where is it? What is it? What happened to it?
Valerie, would you like to take this?
Well, the World Stone, as we know it, was shattered into pieces. Where those pieces are, what is being done with them, unknown at this point. Would be interesting to explore for the future, perhaps. But as far as we know right now, it's gone.
So we know that demon plus angel equals human or equals Nephilim. And when Tyrael gets rid of his angelness, whatever qualities make him into an angel, he appears human. Is what Tyrael currently is, would you call it human, or is he something else?
I think Leonard wants to answer that one.
Once again, thank you. He is not human, he's mortal. He chose the form of a human. He's always been, well, ever since the Sin War, he's been on the side of the humans. He has a lot of respect for humanity, and he really thinks humanity is, the way of the future to a large degree. And even during the cinematic between him and Imperius in Diablo 3, he's trying to convince Imperius that they should side with the humans. So he's basically casting his lot with the humans. He felt he should look like a human, but he is not a Nephilim. He never had any demon in him whatsoever. He's pure. He was pure angel. Now he's just a mortal who has a really cool sword.
So if I could, so what's the difference between mortal and human, basically?
Well, humans in the Diablo universe are half angel and half demon. So that would be pretty much it. He's not Nephilim. He's not descended from Nephilim. So he's 100% descended from angel DNA, I guess you would call it. But he gave up his powers, gave up a lot of what made him a celestial being, I guess you'd call it, to join with the humans and do what he could from that end, because he was forbidden by angelic law from interfering.
So the theme of Reaper of Souls is death, and Deckard Cain is a pretty big character in the Diablo universe. Is there going to be any reference to his death or his life?
I guess I would I would say that yes, there's absolutely a lot of references to Deckard in Reaper of Souls. He obviously was a huge part of the Diablo universe, and certainly a huge part of the events of Diablo 3. So there's no way that this expansion would be able to play out without hearing his voice and feeling his influence.
Thank you.
Hello. Deckard Cain's death felt really premature and really unannounced. Was that to make Leia's character develop it a little bit more? Develop Leia's character, maybe start a corruption or something?
That's a good question, and at the risk of wearing his throat out, I'm going to ask Leonard to field that one as well.
The reason we decided that Deckard Cain was going to pass on was we really wanted to up the emotional stakes, not only for Leia, but for Tyrael and for the player as well, because he's a beloved character. We loved him as much as everybody else did. But I think you pretty much hit it on the head. It was to pass the torch. From a storytelling standpoint, he kind of filled the same role as Tyrael ended up filling after him. But there was a lot of... we meant for there to be a lot of drama and just emotional depth with the fact that he had passed on, and this is what was kind of moving them forward. And a lot of the stuff, I think there's kind of an undertone of the fact that he might have figured out a lot of what was going on if he had been around. So it was doubly tragic that he had passed on.
Thank you so much. My question is, we know what Tyrael in humanity is going to do in response to this, but what is Imperius going to be doing to this?
In response to Malthael?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, all right. That's also an excellent question, and I'm going to ask Michael to address that.
Well, I think it's definitely a big deal in heaven that all this is happening, and a lot of the different factions are going to sort of react in different ways to all the events. Obviously, Tyrael has a more human-centric focus because he's really bet on humanity as being like this best hope for the future. Imperius, of course, is not quite as big a fan of the mortals as Tyrael is. So he's very much going to be a representative of that other perspective.
Hi. So a lot of the races in Diablo, or the classes in Diablo 3, have really long histories in Sanctuary. But the demon hunters seem to be fairly new to Sanctuary. Were they just established after the shattering of the World Stone, or what's their history?
I think Valerie can speak very well to the demon hunter.
Yes, thank you for asking. So the events of Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 obviously have started this tremendous effect on the world and all of the people living within it. And as these demon attacks were happening when you were playing Diablo 1 and trying to defeat the forces of Diablo, other people were noticing, and like our hero demon hunter, their lives were being affected, their families were being slaughtered, and these people want vengeance. So they gathered together, they went to the north, to the Dreadlands, and they started training because they knew these things were out there, these monsters from the night that maybe not everyone believes in. And they were ready to fight and to work and to give whatever it takes to take them out.
Hi. I have a religious studies question. It's pretty clear that you guys have been inspired by a bit of Christianity when creating the story of Diablo. Has there been any other religions that you have been inspired of when creating the story of Diablo at all?
Well, I think there's sort of two things. There's the Diablo universe as a whole, and then there's the particular story of Diablo 3 and Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls. I mean, obviously the Diablo universe is relies heavily on Judeo-Christian symbols and icons and iconography and all of that. But I think there's definitely a heavy world religion influence throughout. There's certain themes that are pulled from lots of different religions, and I mean, for instance, the monks have a very different, sort of a non-Judeo-Christian take on the world. In terms of the particular narrative of the story, I think the universe has kind of taken on enough of a life of its own that the story that happens in that universe is really drawing upon the universe itself, right? So the things that happen in the story are based on the kind of place that the Diablo universe is. But in the creation of that universe, there's definitely, I think there's influences from all the major world religions.
Yeah, I know, like, for my part, when I'm looking at a new culture or class or character, I really think of Diablo as, it's very similar to our world, right? But with some very specific differences. Demons, angels, magic. It's sort of this awesome dark fantasy realization, right? And so what I like to do a lot of times is draw inspiration from the world and stuff, our history and our beliefs, and then sort of change them or find what's really interesting about them, and then, push them a little farther and see what that would be in a darker setting.
So I wanted to ask you about Leia's soul. Tyrael kind of alluded to the fact that, he hoped that maybe they could be able to have saved her. Are there plans to kind of give us as players the ability to maybe go back and redeem her soul?
I feel bad when you get a bunch of writers on the stage. A lot of the answers tend to be, "We're not going to say." It's just we're always trying to figure out how to share like really fun story information with you without actually spoiling things that might happen. So I would just say that right now we don't have any plans to sort of revisit what happened with Leia. I think one thing I always feel like with major characters that have suffered a sad fate in games is just that for that fate to have any meaning, it kind of has to exist for a while. I worked on StarCraft for years, and right after Wings of Liberty came out, everybody asked us, when is Tychus coming back, And the answer is, if he came back right away, then it wouldn't mean anything. So Leia is definitely, on our radar, but we're not looking at doing anything with her right now.
So I read through the Book of Tyrael on the plane here, and I know also in the cinematic you released, there's a lot of talk about the Nephilim ruins under Westmarch, and that got me thinking. Are the Nephilim, we've talked about them as just kind of like a race of powerful beings. Did they have a culture that's distinct from the cultures we see on Sanctuary now? Was there more than one Nephilim culture? Did they have unique architecture? Did they have, writing, or were they a pre-literate culture? Is there anything you can tell us about the lives of these incredibly powerful beings? And then maybe when they noticed their power going away, did that affect their culture in any way?
Absolutely, that's a great question. This is one that I feel like almost everybody on this panel probably has some good stuff to contribute. So I'm gonna kick it to Justin to start, and then invite the rest of these crazy folk to jump in.
Well, for starters, at the Drowned Temple, when they realized that their power was fading, they were obviously scared enough to make deals, panic, hide out. As far as the multiple cultures go, they were around a long time ago. It's hard to tell. I know in some things it makes it seem like it was very brief, but that was to angels and demons, who were at very least very long-lived, if not completely immortal. As far as the actual details of the cultures, I'm going to throw that back to...
I'll jump in here. Well, the ancients were the first Nephilim. So if you think of Bulkathos versus Vasily, or Finsakely, however you say that version of his name, they had very different cultures. They were technically brothers, but they developed along different lines. Bulkathos, I don't think any of them were pre-literate per se, because they were, it'd be a very strange childhood, but they were raised by angels and demons. And angels and demons are very intelligent creatures in different ways. So they did each have. There were a bunch of different cultures. There's Esu and there's Bulkathos and all the other ancients, and that did influence the different parts of the world that they came from. Especially, I mean, the most direct correlation is from Bulkathos to the barbarians. Anybody else have anything to add?
Good. Valerie, I think you've done some work on how the Nephilim felt when they started to become less powerful.
Yes. So if you can imagine a race of people who begin at their golden age, essentially, and then everything goes downhill from there. That's pretty much what happened after Inarius changed the World Stone. These people who were used to their power and their knowledge, their children were born weaker and weaker, and some didn't survive. So it was just this crushing development for them, which